Welcome to another episode of the Audio Insider podcast from AXPONA. My name is Lenny Florentine, and today I'm joined by Itai from Heaven 11 Audio. What is happening, man? How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm
So this
here
is
in.
this is going to be fun because I am not familiar with Heaven 11, and I think maybe a lot of people out there may not be as well. So, but before we get into the brand, I don't know you either. So I need to get to know you a little bit. So tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into hi-fi, and where your journey began.
So it's my journey is kind of a convoluted. It kind of came in a convoluted way, but just to give maybe like a context, I'm 55 years old. So I grew up in like the late 70s, early 80s, hi-fi golden age, and I mean, back then my parents had a Fisher system. I just remember it being like this beautiful slab of silver with aqua lighting and clicky relays and machined knobs. And whenever we'd go to like our uncles, it was always, you can touch the TV, but don't touch the stereo. Everybody had their stereo set up, and it was like the main thing in the living room, and you weren't allowed to touch it.
That's how it was back then. I'm a vintage
Yeah.
audio guy, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Like
Yeah.
that silver face with the aqua blue, and I know the
Yeah.
exact fishers you're talking about.
Yeah.
I can picture it. And stereos were a big deal.
They were a big deal, and probably because TV was so boring back then. You only had 4 or 5 channels, and you turned it off and you turned on your music, and the highlight was what record did you get that month. I went to college, and I was studying business administration, and I would go and hang out at the college library, just pick out books for the weekend. And one day I picked up this book on the Bauhaus, thinking it was about the band Bauhaus. I was like, cool, about my favorite band. And it turned out it was about the Bauhaus School of Design and Architecture, and that's how I discovered design. So the next semester, I switched to design from business administration, and I started my career as a designer, basically. And I always had a fascination for music. I played guitar when I was younger. But you have kids, and they take up a lot of your time, and then the kids grow up a little bit, and you have a little bit more time.
I'm waiting for that, by the way.
Yeah, it'll come.
I mean, it's like there, but now it's driving them everywhere, and teaching them how to drive and all this crazy stuff.
Well, I mean, so they're older. They're older than 4 or 5, so they're like more mobile. So
yeah, they would be considered probably adults at this point. I mean, it's an iffy situation.
Okay.
But, they're at that age where they're technically adults that still rely on their parents.
Right. Still rely on their parents, of course. So when I had a little bit more time, it also coincided with the time that I bought a cottage, and I needed a new sound system for the cottage.
Where was the cottage at?
It's in Phillipsburg, which is like less than a mile away from the Vermont border. So we're right on Lake Champlain.
Well, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. So we had like the beautiful view. I was like, well, I have the beautiful view. Might as well have the music,
Yeah.
So I started looking around for a sound system, and I had a student who said, have you checked out Class D amps? And I was like, don't those suck? And he was like, no, they've come up. And so I got a Class D amp, and I set up my system. And I remember when I set it up, the first feeling I had was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And the next feeling I had was, I'm so pissed that I've wasted all my life listening to home theater systems that, give you such a mediocre and unidimensional musical experience. And my brother came over that day, and I sat him down. And I said, you got to listen to this. You got to listen to this. And he listened to it, and 15 minutes in, and he was like, yeah, it sounds great, but I would never put that little thing in my living room. And when he said that, it kind of clicked. Something clicked inside me, and I started looking around at what they were selling at big box stores, at what they were selling at hi-fi stores. And I started realizing that a lot of the hi-fi stuff on the outside does not look very inspiring. It doesn't pull you in. I mean, it looks like a cable box, and it's basically just a big black box with a lot of buttons. And I looked at it and I said, I could do better. I could do better. And I think it deserves to be better, because a lot of my friends were getting rid of their receivers and they were buying Bluetooth speakers to replace them.
You can't let them do that.
You can't let them do that. And you know what they always say? They say, yeah, but mine sounds good, And then you're there and they put it on, and 15 minutes later, I'm like, okay, let's turn off the Bluetooth speaker and continue talking.
You don't want to waste all these years like you did and I did and everybody did with the AVR systems, forgetting how 2-channel sounded.
Yeah. So I did a Kickstarter, basically. I met a manufacturer. He told me it was going to cost, I think he said it was going to cost $200 to make these things. And I said, yeah, right. He's being optimistic. Let's say $400. So I ended up selling them for $700, and of course it costs a lot more than $700 to make. So I ended up making $0, but through the process, I learned what it took to run a hi-fi business, and I met 2 amazing engineers, and I started my hi-fi company. So after 2 years of hard work and a lot of failures, Heaven 11 was born.
That's amazing. I mean, you can't win at anything until you fail multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, I don't aim to fail, but I think you should always have a permission to fail, because if you don't try something harder than what you think you could do, then you won't progress. You'll just stay where you are, and you won't come out with anything new, and you won't come out with that revolutionary idea, because you need to do that leap of faith.
Right. And so how many years has Heaven 11 been around?
I consider the starting point 2020. The 2019 was when I delivered my last Kickstarter. Like the end of 2019 was when I delivered my last Kickstarter model, and 2020 we came out with the Billy 1. And then we had 2 in 2023 or 2022, I don't remember. And now we're coming out with the Billy 3. So,
and this is an integrated amp.
It's an integrated amp. So what I wanted to do basically was to make a no-nonsense amplifier that would take all my friends who are into Bluetooth speakers, because they're so easy, and give them an option where they would have, the DAC is already included in it. The phono stage is included. There's a Bluetooth receiver, and they're also a headphone amp. So basically, it's like a whole package. You don't need any other appendages. That was like the starting point of Billy, was to make a package that would be the whole thing. And then, of course, the tubes came along. Somehow during the process, we had said, let's try putting a tube preamp with the Class D. And that was the magic formula. Well, the magic formula was my engineer, who was he's like a tube encyclopedia, Denis Roson. He's worked with Tenor Audio. He's worked with a bunch of brands. And my other engineer, Sylvain Savard, who's he comes from the instrumentation world, where every, noises are 0.0000. So those two put together came up with an amazing product.
So when you show this to your friends, these Bluetooth speaker guys, right? First off, the front of this looks amazing. It's a nice construction. You had the knobs and whatnot. It's you can see the design history in it. But what do they think when they see the tubes? What is the reaction when someone sees this for the first time?
A lot of people are intrigued. I remember my girlfriend, when I first met her, she was like, what are those salt and pepper shakers on top? You know,
That's great. The salt and pepper shakers.
Shout out to my wonderful girlfriend, Anique.
It's for the kitchen. You got one in the kitchen. You know?
People's first reactions is that they think they're like decorative lamps or something. But other people say, "Oh, wasn't that what we had in TVs when we were kids?" But you know, I think most people, when I tell them I make stereo amplifiers, they're like, they have no idea what I'm talking about. You know.
So, what is the Billy named after? I know there's a story here.
Yeah, so Billy is named after one of my favorite artists, Billie Holiday. I think, like, as a designer, it's always where you get to a point in a conception of an object where it starts having a personality, and it's a good idea to anchor that with a name. So, you know, Billie's got her signature song, Body and Soul. And that's basically what I wanted to do with this amplifier, was to make music come alive, you know. We also have a Quincy for Quincy Jones, and we have a Lemmy for Lemmy Kilmister coming out too. And those products, because of the names that I gave them when I was conceiving them, will have like that kind of general idea. You know, Quincy is going to be a higher end preamp, and Lemmy is going to be a power amp, just a power amp.
I love the story behind like that. That just gives it a little more talking points when you show your friends, but it also like the inspiration behind it. I think is pretty cool. Then it's not just like blah 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 Model 1 or whatever. Like you have a story behind like what goes into the amp.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm a big music guy. I listen to a lot of music. It's funny.
So what are you listening to now? You listen to a lot of music. So tell me some of the maybe something new that you're listening to now.
So I was kind of disappointed that the new Michael Kiwanuka was not on anybody's 2024 list, because I thought that was like a great album. His last album, Small Changes. I just loved it. The first time I heard it, I played it 3 times in a row. You know, I just couldn't get enough of it. I just think kudos to Michael. That was a great album. I listen to a lot of music. Like the other day, we were in the car, and I had my Apple station, whatever it's called, For You or whatever, and we were cycling through some songs, and it had like you know, classical piano sonatas. It had dub techno. It had roots reggae. It had country. And my girlfriend turned to me and she said, "You know, when I listen to your musical selection, I realize how small my musical world is. It's basically indie rock." And she also finished it by saying, "And your music sucks."
I mean, indie rock is, I mean, kind of actually a little. There's a lot of places you can go with indie rock. I mean,
there's a lot of places. There's a lot of places you could go with music. Period. Especially now with streaming, it's just like. I'm just happy that when I discover an artist, they're still alive and they're not dead yet, you know, because there's just so many artists to discover. And I hate it when I just discovered somebody and then I go read their bio and I read that they died, you know, 3 years ago or whatever. I'm like,
no more new music. So do you have like a playlist that you like to like demonstrate these amps on? Is there like certain songs on a playlist that you're like,
I've built a playlist for AXPONA. I've been building it for months actually for AXPONA, and because I don't necessarily believe in streaming in shows. I think there's always some sort of technological challenge.
This is not false. This is the thing that happens. Everyone, you know, that's a lot of people trying to use Wi-Fi at one time. So having your own playlist is important.
Yeah. So I tell people you can request anything you want as long as it's on the playlist, you know. And since I listen to a lot of different music, well, first to be on the playlist, I gotta actually dig it. I can't do it. If I don't like the music, I'm not going to play it. So you're not going to hear any Diana Krall at the Heaven 11 room this year. You know,
you'll hear it at every other room. Except, you know, that's okay. The stuff that I request in these rooms is nothing that any of them play. So it's always fun to hear. I love hearing new stuff. I think that's like an opportunity for people because you go around the show, to your point, and this is all shows, and this is just everywhere you demo stuff, and it's always, a lot of people play the same 5 or 10 tracks, and I love going in a room where people just play something. It doesn't even matter what it is. If it's something
Yeah.
different, it's always exciting, or when they take requests or anything like that. I think that's really good.
Yeah.
Is there a certain type of speakers that you like? What kind of speakers are you using with this?
So this year we're going to be using the Pure Audio Project Trio 10s. Shout out to Pure Audio Project. I personally, I'm a big fan of dipole speakers. So what you see in the back there, those are quads, electrostats, magneplanar, open baffle. I call that swimming in music. Basically, it's just I love that all over sound, and I think what's special about Pure Audio Project is they actually have, two 10-inch woofers in the Trio 10s, and it gives you that kick, which is sometimes most of the times lacking in open baffle or electrostatic speakers.
So how many watts is your amp?
So the Billy 3 is 250 watts RMS into 4 and 150 into 8.
Wow, that's actually
Yeah.
pretty. It's more powerful than I was expecting. And are the tubes like in the preamp portion?
Yeah, the tubes are in the preamp portion. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that my engineers do to get the most, because what you want to do with tubes is you want to get second order harmonics. And, Denise got his secret formula to get his second order harmonics. And that's what basically gives you that beautiful, luscious tube sound. And then that's fed into a Class D amp. I mean, this is actually the Billy 3 right here. So it's a bit bigger than the Billy 2, but it's still quite small. Like I remember last year at AXPONA, people walked in and they go, "Oh yeah, that's a nice tube preamp. And what are you using for an amplifier?" And I'm like, "No, this is the amplifier and the preamp." And they're like, "Where's the DAC?" Well, the DAC's in there too, So Class D is amazing. It's
Well,
very compact.
yeah, and it's interesting because lately I've been hearing a lot of people that are like they want class AB, and a lot of people have gone to AB, and I've actually had a lot of people asking for class D, right? And they're getting a little harder to find. Everybody's kind of been migrating over to AB, and there's still a lot of people that just love class D. And like when you said, you got 250 watts into 4 ohms, or even 150 into 8 into that box, and if you're using it on the type of speakers you're using, it's got to have some power to it and some punch. It's not, for it to operate those type of speakers. I mean, it's gotta be a little hefty, especially when you said like you like that the bass and it hits.
Yeah,
It's a little powerful. Like you
yeah,
have
for
to
sure.
have power behind that for that to happen.
It's got tons of grunt. It's got a lot more grunt than AB. If I had to choose another category than Class D, it would be Class A, quite frankly. But Class A is fantastic, but it's like a toaster. It's like a toaster that's always on. You could set your coffee on there to warm it up for the whole day if you want to. It weighs 75 pounds. It's humongous. It's expensive. If it's a tube one, it's hard to maintain. So again, with the Billy, what we were trying to do, because you can't do everything, so you have to pick your battles, is we were trying to give the most people what they needed. So, there's a phono stage, there's a Bluetooth, there's a DAC, and there's also quite a powerful amplifier. And on top of that, you get a very good tube pre. So for any music lover, I think that would be like a winning combination. And this year, what we did, because we've had a lot of requests from audiophiles that have their own DAC and they have their own phono stage. So what we did this year was we also came up with a Spartan version, which is just inputs, no DAC, no phono stage, nothing. It's Spartan, it's bare, and it just has the tube pre and the Class D amp and a headphone amp. And yeah, so it's like it's bring your own party. bring your own equipment, and you get eight inputs. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exciting because a lot of people like to play around with stuff. So you have people that like everything in one. Then you have, the other half of people or whatever that like to add their own DAC and everything to it and just switch around those components and have some fun. Do you see, like, is there a trend that you see going forward in hi-fi, whether it's, and maybe it's just both, right? Maybe it's people that like to tinker and people that don't, and they just want to simplify.
Yeah.
Is there like a trend that you think things are going to go towards, or you think it's just going to be like split down the middle?
I don't know if it's going to be split down the middle, or people want to keep it simple. Like, from what I gather from our pre-orders, it's about 60-40. So 60% of the people went for the classic, which is the all included, and 40 went for the bare bones Spartan. So I think there's still quite a few people who want to, tinker. And to be fair, if it's taken you like 3 or 4 years to find the perfect phono stage, and it really works well with the cartridge you're using, why not be able to keep that? Same thing for the DAC or your streamer. So I completely understand that. And also, last year at AXPONA, I had a gentleman come up to me and he said, because we use Icepowers in these, and he said, "Are you planning on putting any Hypex, making a Hypex version?" And I said no. And then I thought about it, and I was like, well, why not? So this year we have two different profiles. You have the Hypex version and you have the Icepower version, and you can also do a DAC that's a dual DAC module or just a simple DAC module, a headphone amp that's quite a bit more powerful than the standard one, because some people don't even use the headphone amp, and other people, that's all they use it for, is for a headphone setup for their office. So we tried to, with my engineer, I sat down and I said, let's think of a modular way of conceiving this product, because I truly believe that everybody's tastes are different. Like my girlfriend says, your music sucks. I think everybody thinks that everybody else's music sucks, by the way.
I think that's probably the truth, actually. Yeah. I think she's spot on there.
Yeah, she usually is. So to me, as a designer, I've always been fascinated by modular systems because I think it brings out the individuality of a person. I think some people want a more holographic sound and some people want a more musical sound. And one isn't better than the other. It's just a question of taste.
I think the modular way of doing this is a really good option. If you can give people the choice to use the amp in the way that they'll want to use the amp, it's only going to make things better for everybody. And if you have a system to where you can incorporate that into different models and stuff, I think that's like the perfect way of doing it. Give people that choice, and I think that's only going to make things better for you over time.
Yeah, and if I can add one more thing, I also think that we're not monoliths in the sense that we change over time. Like the things we used to like 5 or 6 years ago, we might not necessarily enjoy them as much now. Think of how your musical tastes have evolved. Or, for example, I used to hate bourbons and only drink Scotch, and now I much prefer a bourbon to a Scotch. And it's not.
I would also agree with you there. I would also happen to be a bourbon guy.
Yeah, and it's just a question of evolving tastes, and it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's just different, and it doesn't necessarily stay the same over time. So you can imagine that, you could want to maybe have a Hypex version instead of an Icepower version, or go towards a smoother Icepower version from a Hypex version.
Yeah. So what's the difference in those two? Because I'm not really sure on those two options what the difference would be.
So I think, as audiophiles, we tend to exaggerate the differences. Every little thing becomes gigantic. but in general, I would say the Hypex is more of a holographic. So it has, the stereo imaging is much more defined, and things are much more placed in space. And the Icepower is more musical, so it's more of a all over. It might smooth out the rough edges, and it'll give you like a more harmonious picture, whereas the Hypex will give you a more exact, picture. And also, a Hypex is more dynamic. The Icepower is more easygoing. So it really depends on how you prefer to listen to music most times.
Now, are you debuting any of these newer products at AXPONA, or is
Yes.
it the Billy MK3, or is there like a whole selection?
Yeah, we'll definitely bring the Hypex and the Icepower version to AXPONA. I'm still working out how we'll switch between the systems easily, because you don't want to be messing around with speaker cables. So we're still working out how we're going to do that without necessarily compromising the sound. But yeah, we're going to be bringing the MK3 to AXPONA, and it will be a first.
That sounds great. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to listen to it, stop by the room, enjoy it. AXPONA is going to be a great time. I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. It's been fun. I learned a lot. It's a whole new brand that I'm just not familiar with. And then how you do things is just, it's just amazing. You have a story behind the brand, which is perfect. And I'm sure Billie Holiday is on your list, on your playlist that you'll have in the room. And if it's not, you better just go back to that playlist and make sure it is. But I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's on there. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having
me.
Thank you for having me.
And for the Audio Insider podcast from AXPONA, we will see you guys next time.